Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Keenan and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martin Sadler. And Martin, we're in the RFL headquarters again, mate. We've weaseled our way in, but we've got a special guest here with us today. Can you do the honours of introducing him?
Well, it's a great pleasure to introduce Rhodri Jones, who's the Managing Director of Rugby League Commercial. And Rhodri, you must be in a pretty happy frame of mind for two reasons. One is Wigan winning on Saturday night. Despite the controversy, it was a wonderful occasion and a fabulous win. And secondly, I believe you're heading off to Las Vegas this week to take in the opening round of the NRL's fixtures over there. So I'm not surprised you're smiling.
Yeah, lots to smile about. Firstly, thank you for having me. And thanks for taking the time to coming over here. I'll correct you; it's the home of the RFL and Rugby League Commercial. So there are obviously two organisations here in the Etihad offices, and glad to see that you've enjoyed the coffee and the pastries this morning.
Absolutely.
On behalf of a colleague who does the coffee and John Wilkin, who has provided the pastries from his from his side hustle in the coffee and pastry world. But no, back to business. Yeah, smiling. It's been a great start to the year. We had a great build up to the start of the season. I think the launch was probably one of the best, if not the best, that we've had in terms of the way it looked, the busyness of the day, the stories that were coming out of the day, and we had a lot to look forward to in terms of on the field, but also off the field in terms of the new broadcast landscape that we've got, new commercial deals coming through, new digital partnerships that we've managed to conclude in advance of the start of the season, and we always saw round two as a peak, kind of building towards that peak with
Absolutely.
the World Club Challenge, and Wigan did the business on Saturday, and what a night it was for us here at Rugby League Commercial, for Wigan Warriors themselves, for Super League, for the British game. It was an electric night.
But I'm going to ask you the crucial question, Rhodri. Did you think Jake Wardle's try was a try?
Do you know, live I did actually.
Yeah.
I did live. I did think he'd scored it. And having watched from the other code the France-Scotland ending a couple of weeks ago, I thought we were going to end up in another place like that. So yeah, absolutely. For me, live it was a try, and I didn't take too much notice of the replays.
No, and some people are bad losers, aren't they, Jake? I hate to put the finger on Australians. But
Yeah, I was in a funny position because I'm a Brisbane Broncos fan, so obviously I was a bit torn. Do I, support the NRL club that just beat my team, or do I jump on board with Wigan? So as a neutral, I really, really enjoyed the game. I thought it was, just down to the wire, edge of your seat sort of stuff, and what a better way to promote our game as a whole than that matchup that we saw over the weekend.
There was definite goosebumps on the back of my neck, when the two teams came out.
Absolutely.
Having listened to Heather Small, Russell Watson, and I wasn't around in the game, in the early 2000s, but everyone keeps referencing the great rivalry between England and Australia, and I kind of thought back when the two teams were walking out, I thought this must be what that Great Britain-Australia Test match felt like.
Absolutely.
Back in those early 2000 matches, but particularly at the DW Stadium, which is synonymous with rugby league and rugby league success. I thought this is on a par with that, and I think it's probably one of the best, if not the best event that I've been to for a number of years from a rugby league perspective.
Well, selling out so quickly, so far in advance. I mean, I've written in League Express this week, Rhodri, that you contrast it with last year's game that Penrith hosted, St Helens, and of course it was another wonderful night for English rugby league. But Penrith, quite frankly, when they staged that game, I think they will have learned a lot of lessons from the way Wigan staged it, because what Wigan did was far more impressive, putting aside the game itself and the result. The way they staged the game and promoted it was tremendous. And this idea that the Australians always do things right and better than us is just ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, 100% agree. And I look, we cannot underestimate how big that trip for St Helens was last year. To win down under and to win at Penrith, the home of the champions, last couple of years is, cannot be underestimated.
And the film they've done of it is tremendous as well,
fantastic.
If you've seen that.
Yeah, it really is. And all credit to the St Helens Club for having the foresight to do that behind-the-scenes stuff. And we were really pleased that they allowed us and Sky Sports to put that on Sky Sports last week as a nice build up to what was to come on Saturday night.
But it's a great tribute to the young guy who did it at St Helens that Sky agreed to do that because the quality was good enough to justify showing it on Sky.
Yeah, and look, there's some talented people in the game, both on the field but also off the field, and that's a really good example of it. And you could probably go across most of the clubs and pick out certain individuals who are doing really great jobs in and around their club environments everywhere, from St Helens through to Hull KR on the other side of the country. We've got some really talented people working behind the scenes, and that's all, that's music to our ears. That's what we want. That was the whole idea of the creation of Rugby League Commercial, to better our clubs, better ourselves centrally, yes, but also to better our clubs, and that's certainly something we've seen over the last 6 to 12 months with the introduction of IMG to try and raise standards. The grading clearly plays a part in all of that. We firmly believe that the clubs are working as well as they have done for a number of years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I guess before we get into some of the stuff we're seeing in the league this year, we might rewind time, go back in time to when you were just a young boy. When was your first sort of involvement with a great game of rugby league?
So I'm a 1990s Super League kind of kid, as it were. So I was born in 83. So by the time it got to kind of mid-90s, 2000s, it was the Bulls phenomenon. I was living in Bradford, like Martin said, and we're a rugby union family. With a name like mine, there's not much escaping.
I think you were saying you've got Welsh
heritage. Yeah. So my parents moved up north in the late 70s. I was born in 83, and we're the black sheep of the family in terms of we're the only people in our family that live in England. Everybody still lives in Wales, so the family dialect is Welsh, so it makes for some interesting phone conversations at times when I'm speaking English and they're speaking Welsh to me. Which
I was going to say, can you actually speak Welsh, Rhodri?
I can speak a little bit out of practice, but it certainly makes for some interesting phone conversations when my wife is listening, because she can't actually understand what they're saying and can only go from what I'm replying with. So yeah, the Bulls for me in the summer of kind of 96, 98, kind of going through those years. Rugby family, summer there was no other rugby other than rugby league, and I'm pretty sure during the summer holidays there was a need for a rugby fix. So off we went to Odsal. I remember going to Valley Parade as well that summer that they played at Valley Parade. So it was
when Abia Koku was the chief executive.
That's right. Yeah. So watching Steve McNamara, watching Leslie, watching Shantaine, you kind of just names roll off the tongue, don't they? And then towards the end of kind of school life, you kind of change your desires and wants, and suddenly Headingley on a Friday night becomes a bit more of an attractive proposition than perhaps Odsal on a Sunday afternoon. So then Friday nights at Headingley as well, generally in the away end, but I have stood in the South Stand, in the old South Stand, a couple of times, and then obviously into Headingley after that when it was legal limit to have a drink. So yeah, really enjoyed those kind of growing up.
I think your father was the headmaster of Woodhouse Grove, was he?
Yeah, he was deputy head of Woodhouse Grove School, which is the school I went to.
Right.
So
which actually is a very famous rugby union school, isn't it? I mean, there's quite a few well-known rugby union players have come through Woodhouse Grove.
Yeah, and probably the first one that came through those ranks was a surname known in rugby league, Sampson. Paul Sampson. So
yes.
I remember being at Odsal watching Paul Sampson play for Halifax against Bradford Bulls. There've been a couple of boys that have gone through recently. The McCormack twins at Leeds now are Woodhouse Grove boys. But yeah, it was a very very good, strong rugby union school, and certainly gave a good grounding for what was to come in later life.
And at one time, the Bulls used to train there, didn't they? Before they moved to Tong.
Yeah, they moved in as I was leaving, and that's how I got into kind of the sports administration world. Having finished university, I guess there was two choices. One was to go down to London and try and get into sports. That's what I always wanted to do. Go down to London and see if there was a role down there, because that's where the majority of roles were, or come home and see if I could try and find some work experience. And I was fortunate enough through the connection with the school to get 2 weeks work experience at Bradford Bulls, which those first 2 weeks involved driving around in the Bulls van with the guy who used to dress up as Bull Boy or Bull Man, putting posters up and around the local area to try and drive ticket sales. So that was the first experience of sports marketing that I'd had. And as they say, that's kind of, there's always a start somewhere.
Was Peter Deakin still at Bradford at that time, or had he left already?
No, he'd left, so I was under the tutelage, I think you'd say, of the now past Debbie Charlton,
who was such a lovely woman.
She was fantastic.
Yeah,
and still reference her in life now to some of the things that she did even back then.
She was great, I thought.
The iconic Stuart Duffy. Who obviously done his time at Leeds Rhinos beforehand, Leeds Rugby, with Danny Rubin, another ex-colleague of mine.
Absolutely.
And Ryan Duckett, who's now Chief Executive of Derbyshire Cricket Club. So, started the career in good hands.
Yeah, and how long did you spend there before moving on?
Did 2 seasons, in effect. So the first year we lost to Leeds in the grand final, and then the second year we beat Leeds in the grand final. So that was 2005.
Right. And is that when you actually joined the RFL, as it then was?
No, I actually did 9 months over at Hull FC, actually.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
No, not many people do. And I went and worked with Kath Hetherington and Jimmy Rule at the time in the role of media manager.
Which was before they moved into the new stadium?
They were at the new stadium.
Oh, they were already there,
They just won the Challenge Cup in Cardiff.
Right.
And it was also the period of time that they sacked John Keir.
Yes.
So for a 23, 24-year-old, it was quite an interesting time to kind of get used to it, and also not really knowing and understanding what Hull was like.
When Peter Sharp was coming in as their head coach.
Yeah, so Peter Sharp came in, great, really nice man. Really enjoyed working there. But there was an opportunity that came up at the RFL then in 2007 that I applied for and was lucky enough to get.
Right. So how did you go from there to being the MD now? That's quite an interesting journey, and congratulations on having made it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's very kind. I think it's taken time, as you would expect, and kind of earned the stripes as you go along the journey. But the role that I started in was very much around looking after sponsors, sponsor rights delivery. And slowly but surely you get to learn the business and understand the business, and you kind of start trying to get involved in other bits and pieces. So sponsorship to start with turned into sponsorship and events, so our iconic events and managing and overseeing the delivery of those. And then you'll remember this, Martin, when kind of in those, 2014, 2015, there was a move to bring Super League as a more concerted organisation under the leadership of Blake Solly.
Yes.
And we moved out of Redhall and moved into Media City. And that was a real change kind of in kind of administration, the way we worked, the way we operated, very much focused on the commerciality of it all. And and that was where, got given an opportunity to lead on the partnerships and the events and the broadcast stuff.
Yeah, Blake was quite a determined guy, wasn't he? Of course, he's now at South Sydney as their chief.
Yeah, that's right.
But did you enjoy working with him?
Very much so. Yeah, very, very much so. There was a group of us, and some are still here today, and we still reference that time, that period, because you're right, Blake did put some real impetus into it. And then obviously we went through the change where the Super League split away from the RFL, and Robert Elston came in, and Robert was kind enough to ask me to go with him to Super League, which was again too good an opportunity to turn down. And then obviously that kind of comes back full circle.
Looking back, I mean, looking from the outside and looking now with the benefit of hindsight, I suppose, Rhodri, that whole breaking away thing in the way it happened looks like a mistake. I mean, would you characterise it as that, or would you say it wasn't a mistake, but nonetheless it obviously didn't go quite according to plan, did it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a mistake. I wouldn't say it was a mistake. I think there was probably good reasons for it to happen in the first place.
I know Ian Lenigan played a significant role, didn't he?
I believe
in
so.
doing that.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think looking back, like I say, I don't think it was a mistake for particular reasons. I think the hand that we were dealt with wasn't ideal. If you recall, we went into broadcast negotiations at the time when COVID hit. And then obviously there was an inquiry into private equity, and that obviously being declined around the Super League shareholder table. So there were a couple of things that didn't quite go as planned or as hoped. I don't think, again, we can't underestimate how big an impact COVID had on us at that time.
No, it was incredible that we got through COVID without too many clubs, other than one or two on the margins perhaps, going under. Because you look at rugby union, for example, and I still don't think they've fully recovered from the epidemic, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think. Look, I guess you just need to see the three clubs that have disappeared from Premiership rugby. That is kind of proof in itself, isn't it? We were, it was a totally unique experience. You go from trying to sell the sport to brands and commercial partners to the next day actually going, how are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? And even now, if I went on in the previous files, I could find probably 7 or 8 different calendars that we were working towards, because we just didn't know anything and
didn't know when you were going to restart.
Yeah, exactly.
That last game before the close down, Castleford versus St Helens.
Yeah,
who would have? It was hard to take
that was
on board.
Sunday, wasn't it? And Sky, I remember taking that phone call from Sky. Obviously, we were talking about it during the week, and don't forget the Roosters had just been over for the World Cup Challenge, which in itself is just, they knew what COVID was and we didn't. We didn't. We heard about it, but we didn't really know what it was, and they'd effectively flown over it, where it was coming from. And so, and I remember that launch that year, Sonny Bill Williams was on the stage, and there was a real positivity, again, a bit like this year, there was a real positivity around Super League, and we got to March, and I remember taking that phone call from Sky to say, football's gone, this is gone, are you still playing? And I said, well, yeah, we're still going to play round 3, I think it was.
Yeah.
Can we show a game on Sunday? And I said, well, you've got Castleford St Helens at 3. That'll do. We'll take it. Yeah. And literally, that was the end of it, wasn't it?
It was for several months, actually. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when you look at, you just mentioned Sonny Bill Williams there. Of course, he was representing Toronto Wolfpack on stage, and obviously, they were the main. They were the biggest casualties of COVID, weren't they, in a rugby league sense? I mean, it had been so exciting to see them coming into the game and clubs going over there to Toronto to play, and they were creating a unique environment and a unique atmosphere, I think, with some very good crowds that they were drawing. Looking back, was there, was there extinction inevitable given what happened? And if it hadn't been for COVID, do you think they would have still been involved?
Yeah, ultimately COVID killed them off, didn't it?
Yeah.
It just became too difficult, and as much as we tried to help and support a solution-based focus, it was just impossible for them to see that through. Would they still be around today? It's a really good question, Martin. I don't think we know the answer.
No.
Clearly, we don't know the answer. I'd like to think that they would definitely have seen that 2020 season out.
Yeah,
they were. I think it was round 6 actually, because remember there were 6 losses from 6 matches.
Yeah,
but they would have taken some scalps that summer. I'm pretty sure of it in Toronto, having been out there playing on the pitch that they had, playing in the heat that there was in Toronto. They would have taken some scalps. So I think it would have been really interesting to see where they would have ended up that year.
And afterwards as well. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just ask on that. I remember being in Australia at the time. There was a lot of reports around them doing a Netflix documentary around Sonny Bill's time in Toronto. Was that ever going to happen? Or because I know he signed a mammoth deal and there was talks of potentially a documentary happening as well. You just can't help but think how beneficial something like that could have been to rugby league.
Possibly.
In Toronto.
Yeah, possibly. I don't know about that. Yeah, I mean, anything like that where it puts our sport in a different sphere is always beneficial, I believe, and and that's always been one of our biggest challenges. In that we talk about the bubble, the rugby league bubble, and pushing out of that bubble, and that's clearly one of the challenges that we continually face, but we're determined to make a success of.
Could I just ask you about that rugby league bubble and the fact that the rugby league audience, despite everything that you do or the game itself does, it's difficult to make that audience expand because in the modern world people are set on what they enjoy and life is compartmentalised, so to speak, isn't it? People are football fans, rugby union fans, rugby league fans, ice hockey fans, tennis fans, or whatever, but they don't seem to cross boundaries in quite the way that they used to. But having said that, Rhodri, one of the most impressive things at the weekend had nothing to do with the World Club Challenge. It was the crowd that turned out at London Broncos, 5,102, the reported figure. And I wrote this week in League Express, where the heck did those people come from? Because, most of us had predicted that London, because they're going to struggle to stay in Super League, obviously, at the end of the year, regardless of their results, given the grading system. Most of us thought that would have an adverse effect on the crowds that they might pull. Well, that certainly didn't seem to be the case on Friday night, did it?
Yeah, look, hats off to London and the team down there.
Do you know where they all got those fans from?
I don't. I know a lot of hard work's gone in there in the off season from Jason and the team down there and behind the scenes. Interestingly, our head of marketing here has got a call with them this afternoon because he wants to ask that question.
Yeah.
He said he kind of wants to know where did all these people come from, and
will they come again? That's
will
the
they
other
come
thing.
again? And don't forget, we've got Wembley in June this year, and that's an opportunity to showcase the best of our sport, etc. So, look, I was really delighted for the London club. With that crowd on Friday.
Have you managed to speak to anybody down there, to David Hughes or anyone like that?
I haven't yet. Conversed with Robert Hicks, who was at the game on Friday night whilst I was sat at Warrington. Yeah. So you can imagine what we were talking about. But one of the things he said was, look, the crowd, he probably underestimated, the crowd at London on Friday, and I'm really pleased for them. Really, and they've got Wigan in 2 weeks' time. And
absolutely,
you'd like to think that crowd would.
Well, Wigan will probably take 5,000 themselves.
Probably maintain that crowd number. It was a Friday night as well.
Yeah.
Which again, you're not sure whether that will work or not.
No.
Look, I think,
and it looks a great stadium, doesn't it? If you've seen the game,
it is. Yeah, it is a good stadium.
It looks just right for them.
Yeah, it's a good stadium. It's akin to kind of York. That's kind of how I felt about it. And look, I think it's a great start for them. I know it's not quite going their way on the field, but I think that will come as well. But off the field, look, from an attendance perspective, a really positive start for them.
Yeah, they certainly didn't play with any lack of spirit, although obviously they were just a bit overmatched, really, against the Catalans, weren't they? But interesting game for them at Hull this coming weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what you call a 4-pointer, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it was. It's been a pretty tough schedule for them to start the season. Come up against Saints, Catalans, and then Wigan in a few weeks' time.
I don't know who does the fixtures for you, but they don't like London Broncos all that much.
Yeah, well, you're probably looking at him, Martin, to be fair. So, but look, fixtures. It's a really, just to touch on that. It's a really interesting one because you could look at anybody's schedule and go, "Ooh, that's not great." Yeah. And that's just it's the way the computer throws them out. We obviously have so many things that we have to consider.
Sure.
There is an element of there are no easy games and there's no ideal sequence.
I think Huddersfield were complaining, weren't they, that of their first 9 games, only 2 of them are at home, or something like that. I mean, is that for any specific reason, or is it just the way the fixtures fall out?
I think, without checking here, I think there'll be an element of Huddersfield Town home games, and then also pitch remediation work.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of broadcasting deals that have gone in for this season. We've seen the launch of Super League Plus app. Do you feel like the visibility of the league as a whole is at one of its highest points that we've seen over the last decade or so?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just the virtue that, I think we were in a good place last year with Channel 4. The BBC immediately adds another couple of 100,000 on top of that. So at this point, this season, next 3 years, the game will be as noticeable, will have its biggest possible audience as it ever has done. So from that perspective, it's a huge opportunity for us. That's been the message from our perspective, certainly in the off season and coming into the start of the year, is that this will be the most viewed competition there ever has been. So it's how we capitalise on that is going to be key.
And how successful has the launch of the Super League Plus app been? Have you seen many people signing up for it?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a real positive start. I think there was always two elements for us. One is, does the platform, will it work? In terms of operationally, will it work? There's a lot to consider when you think about it. Sky have been fantastic in terms of helping us through all of that. As of IMG, we're using Endeavour Streaming, part of the IMG group.
Sky seemed to have. I mean, I was at the Sky dinner in Manchester, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, and Sky seemed to be really pushing the boat out for rugby league this year. As you've already said, why have they? I mean, they've obviously got new commentators. Dave Woods has gone to Sky. Mark Jones is doing a lot of the games as well. And it's coming across really well, I think.
Good.
But, why is Sky being so cooperative? I mean, it's a stupid question to ask in a way, because hopefully they always are. But they do seem to be making the extra effort this season, don't they?
Yeah, and I think there's two bits. I think one, that support has always been there. They've just never shouted about it.
No.
And I think they've made an effort this year to really shout about it, which, for the likes of you guys have probably stood up and noticed the difference.
Yeah.
And then a really, dare I say it, simple change has been changing voices and faces that you see on telly. And suddenly everything feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The quality of Sky Sports is still there. It's always been there, and it's still there now. I just think they have done a really good job of telling people about it this time. They've had a hook to be able to tell people that every game is live on Sky, and then with a change in talent, it just feels different. I have to say, the first 2 weeks, I think they've been excellent. I think the BBC coverage has been excellent as well. So we've done everything we possibly can to put ourselves in the shop window.
Have you had any feedback yet from Saturday night's BBC game? I mean, I think the audience. Somebody told me it peaked at, was it 570,000 or something like that?
Yep.
But have you? I mean, I've not actually seen the BBC's coverage yet, because obviously I was at the game and I've not had time to look back at it. But I just wonder, what has there been much reaction? Because it was interesting, wasn't it? It was on the same day as a couple of Six Nations rugby union matches, one of which the BBC was broadcasting. And I'd bet my bottom dollar that our game was far more exciting than anything they had. But I just wonder whether you've seen much feedback from that game.
Yeah, look, from a BBC perspective, really pleased with how the first 2 weeks have gone. There was a slight risk in that Casford-Wigan game at 5:30 on Saturday.
Yeah.
First game, do people know it's on? And, the conditions and what have you, is it going to be a good game? And it performed really well. And I think if you'd have given them the audience before the game and said, look, would you take it? I think they would have said, absolutely, we'll take that. So I think from week one, it was good. It meant there was good build-up into week two. I think what the broadcast deal also brings, with BBC specifically, but also you could argue with Sky as well, is the other opportunities. So look, if you look at last week, we had Matt Peat and Bevan French in the BBC Sports studios all last Tuesday morning. They did 6 different radio interviews. They were on the BBC Breakfast sofa, etc. And that's because the BBC were televising the game. So all those additional benefits that we get from that BBC relationship certainly help towards the delivery on Saturday night. Look, Saturday night, I think I watched the Sky coverage end to end last night. BBC will be tonight. But the fact that you've got Mark Chapman there, who probably is one of the best, if not the best,
no doubt
broadcasters
about it,
in the country. We've got
I'm glad he was there. Yeah,
he's got the talent around him to be able to pull, to be able to talk about the game, to be able to appeal to that broader audience as well. I think that's what he does really well through his just general being,
he's got a great
expert.
Broadcasting personality.
Exactly. So I'd like to think that, I know the BBC were happy with Saturday. I know my father was very happy it was on Saturday night. He doesn't have Sky, so it was the first time he was able to watch the World Club Challenge. So he was delighted.
Good,
awesome.
Good.
I think on a lot of rugby league fans' Christmas wish list, we're all hoping that one day there'll be a year when every game is on at a different time slot and there's no clashes. Is that something that we could see in the future, or are we always going to have those 3 games on a Friday night at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one, and I think that might be Super League 2.0 in terms of scheduling. I think you guys understand the challenges that we have in terms of, half the league don't own their own stadia, for example. So we're always under the pressure of what the other code or the other round ball are doing. Take Huddersfield as an example, as you've said there. So we don't have a clean home and away ability to play home and away every week because the stadiums aren't available. So that makes it hard anyway. And then to split the round in effect into 6 segments also is a challenge by virtue that whoever plays on Sunday then can't play Thursday the following week, and for all those other various reasons that we've got. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility. I think week 1 was a really good example for me in terms of I think we do have to look at it and consider it. If you think that we had 3 games on the Friday night, and
how did the audience figures go for those 3 games?
Look at the TV audiences. To your point there, I think historically we've had 1 game Thursday, 1 game Friday. We've had a live audience, let's say, or a live attendance at the other Friday night games, but we've never had TV coverage. If you look at the first Friday night, cumulatively, it's a really strong performance for across the 3 games. But there is a hierarchy in terms of how the 3 games performed.
Sure.
And so therefore, to your point, you then look at, well, actually, if you separated those games out, how does that work? And so this weekend for me was a really interesting one because we had Salford Casford on Sunday on its own. We also had Huddersfield St Helens on Saturday at 5:30 on its own. And we only had 2 games clashing on Friday night. And again, cumulatively in round 2, we had more audience than we did in round 1. So to your point, if we were to split it across 6 segments or six blocks, how would our audiences look? And I think we'd end up with probably a higher cumulative audience because it gives people the opportunity to watch more rugby league. It's the devil in the operational detail that I think we will have to look at. We're going to have to look at it.
How do you think the clubs will react to that? Because obviously a lot of clubs love playing on Friday night, don't they? Leeds obviously have a big hospitality market to aim for on a Friday night, and they're reluctant to move away from it. So do you think the clubs would accept it ultimately? I mean, I suppose the thing that would persuade them is if they thought they were going to get more money in the next broadcasting deal because of a change of the sort that you're describing. I mean, is that the way to go?
I think it's a really good question. As you know, we do a lot of consultation with the clubs, and it's something that we'll have a conversation with about. I think for us, we'd look at the first 5 weeks to see how they perform, and I say 5 weeks because week 6 is Easter, where all 6 games are spread across the weekend individually. So I think that will be a good marker in terms of comparing week 6 to the previous 5 weeks to see if there is a correlation between separating the fixtures out. I suspect there will be, having seen how Easter performed for us last year. Look, we would have to do the consultation with clubs. I understand what you're saying, and if you end up with your traditional Friday night clubs all playing in the same round at home, and they all want to play on a Friday, and suddenly one has to play at Saturday lunchtime, the other has to play at 1 o'clock on a Sunday.
But if they try it, they might like it.
There is that.
They're set in their ways, aren't they? In a way, and yet the Australian clubs, they've got used to it, haven't they? And they don't seem to complain.
Yeah, and I think
anymore.
we could probably help. We can probably help along the way as well, and work with the clubs to find the right kind of balance between. Use Leeds as an example, who I have to say, every club, not just Leeds, every club are understanding of when we put a request in to move a fixture, they know why we're asking. So in terms of moving, appreciate it's definitely not ideal for fans and planning trips and all those kind of bits and pieces. But we have to service our broadcast partners ultimately.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think there is. Look, I do think there is a way of doing it, and like you say, Martin, maybe the right way to do it is do as much consultation as we can, but actually just take the decision that we are going to split the round.
Absolutely, yes. I think that's what you should do. Actually, one of the things that struck me about this year was the start of the season, the Hull derby. I thought that was an inspired choice, particularly for a Thursday night. And I actually think Thursday night games are quite important because it's the one night of the week, isn't it, when there's probably no football on TV.
That's right.
Most weeks. So I tend to think that big games on a Thursday night in Super League, if we are going to win potential fans over, the bigger the games that we can put on Thursday night, the better. Ideally local derbies, because I always tend to think, especially in February and March, Rhodri, putting on games that involve one club's fans driving over the M62 in the middle of winter's not a great idea. Yeah. Whereas local derbies between, let's say, the two Hull clubs, or Leeds versus Castleford, or Warrington v Lee, those sorts of games, where you're going to have a lot of fans from both sides, will create an atmosphere and fill a ground and look great on TV.
Yeah, and I think we've certainly tried to do that this year. It's not a perfect science. There was a reason why the Hull derby was Thursday, and then Leeds play Salford on Friday because we felt that it gave the Salford fans more opportunity to travel. Leeds are a Friday night club, as you say, so there is some thought that goes into it. Everyone could probably pick a fixture and go, well, you didn't think about that one, and that's fair. But there are 167 of them, so I'm not promising we get all 167 right.
Yeah.
But again, last weekend in round 2, Hull KR playing Leeds. We know it's a lot easier for Leeds fans to go to Hull KR on a Thursday night than it is for a Hull FC fan to go to Warrington on a Thursday night. So that's why that was scheduled the way it was. This week we don't have a Thursday night game.
Is there any reason for that?
Yeah, and the simple fact is, the feedback we get from clubs was we need to reduce the number of Thursday night games because of the impact it has on attendances and potentially corporate as well for some clubs. So we've tried to work with Sky and they've understood it, especially when it comes to picking fixtures later in the season at shorter notice. Moving them to a Thursday is not ideal. And so we had that in the back of our minds this year, and so there isn't a Thursday night fixture every round this year. There wasn't last year. There's probably even less this year. And this year, the selection of the Thursday night fixture was not needed because, from a Sky perspective, Leeds play Catalan on Saturday, and Sky saying that would be our pick. And we worked around a main event slot that Sky had, and that's why it's ended up on a Saturday at 3:00. So there's lots that goes into it, lots to consider, and I would invite you to come and sit in one of the meetings that we have to understand it.
Well, I'd be delighted. I'd obviously love to do that. Actually, let's just get on to one little bugbear that's cropped up over the last week or so, because obviously, Rhodri, you've seen the news that's broken in Australia about the fact that you'll soon be an employee of the NRL when they buy Super League. I actually rejected that story in League. I thought it was such a nonsensical story that it wasn't even worth running in League Express this week. So I hope it doesn't happen. But obviously, can you actually just shed some light on how on earth that story arose?
Well, I don't actually know if I'm
nothing to do with you.
No, absolutely nothing to do with me. So no, it was. I got a text, like probably a lot of people, that said, "Have you seen this?" And I thought, what are you talking about? So Googled it and found the Matty Johns podcast and thought, oh, this is interesting. I wonder where he's got this from. So look, it was news to us. We're not entirely sure where it's come from. I'm sure it will get mentioned this coming week in Las Vegas, and we'll see if we can find out where the source is. But from our perspective, look, we have engagement with the NRL. We're obviously going to see them this week in Las Vegas, but we haven't had engagement to that subject.
Talking about Las Vegas, are you hoping that we're going to get an invite there for next year? Not just you to go as the MD, but maybe the World Club Challenge, or maybe a couple of maybe a Super League game being added.
It was quite interesting over the last 10 days, I guess, in the build-up to the World Club Challenge, and it definitely wasn't coordinated, but I think 10 days ago or so we were talking about the World Club Challenge perhaps having a place in the Las Vegas weekend, now knowing that the Las Vegas deal is a 5-year deal as opposed to just a one-year hit, as it were. And I think we were probably 2 months too late for this year. When we got round the table with Penrith and Wigan, the question was asked whether it could be played in Las Vegas, but the NRL at that time had committed to the double-header and what have you. So we were slightly late on that one. But certainly the talk pre-World Club was, wouldn't it be great for this game to be in Las Vegas next year? And there were not many people were kind of saying, no, what a terrible idea that is. And then Peter obviously came out last week and said, it'd be great if we could look at some Super League involvement in Las Vegas. Now, that wasn't coordinated by the two organisations. That was just the way he felt about stuff. So do I think it's a possibility? Yeah, I do. I don't know how much of a possibility it is at this point, but I think this week we'll get to find out, because there'll be some conversations about it.
How do you get on with Peter Vlandis? Because he's a very headstrong sort of a guy, isn't he? Very decisive, and, he's pushing the boat out by going to Las Vegas, isn't he?
Yeah, look, I've had limited time with him. I've met him in person once in last year as part of an RLIF meeting. Huge respect for him for what he's done over there. Him and Andrew, to be fair, they're dealing with an absolute beast, aren't they, in terms of the NRL? It's the equivalent of our Premier League. And full respect to both of them, really, and looking forward to spending some more time with them this week.
They're saying they've sold 35,000 tickets now for Saturday night's games. Hopefully they'll get over 40, and maybe even beyond that, 45 perhaps.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think they've been relatively happy with how many tickets they've sold to the local market.
Yeah.
And I know they've sold pretty well to travelling market as well. I know some people who are leaving these shores this week to go over as well, and seeing it as a once in a lifetime opportunity. So it's going to be a really interesting mix of people in the stadium. Probably, dare I say it, perhaps a little bit similar to how the Catalan were or how Toronto was.
Sure.
There'll be an element of some experts.
Yeah.
Some people who just don't have a clue what's going on, but just going for a good time.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's about. So I really hope it's a huge success this week, because look, clearly it would be something that would be great for a Super League to be involved in.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, moving on, about IMG? Obviously, IMG have made a significant impact since they were appointed back in 2022. The most obvious way is with gradings and the grading system, and that's not been accepted entirely by the rugby league community, has it? It's a completely different way of looking at of determining who should play in the top competition. And we've mentioned London Broncos already, who came 24th in the 35 clubs in terms of grading scores, meaning that they will almost certainly not be playing in Super League next year. And there are quite a few objections that people have made to specific elements of grading, particularly the catchment area thing, which does seem to me to be, London Broncos catchment area being the London Borough of Merton, for example, does seem ridiculous, whichever way you look at it. But how happy, broadly speaking, are you happy with the way things are going, and you're confident that it will work out at the end of this season?
Yeah, I'm fully confident, and I think none of this was done in isolation.
No.
In terms of the signing off process. The clubs all signed up to it. The clubs agreed to it. So there was always going to be some bumps in the road, and I think those bumps in the road were only going to become evident once scores were starting to be circulated, because it effectively measured every club. The reason why we brought it in so early was to give clubs the opportunity to go and do something about it. And I think you'll find that a lot of clubs will now have some real focus into certain areas where they know that they can improve their off-field performance. And those are the other four pillars away from the performance pillar. Performance is only 25% of the grading, and that's because we need to have the best clubs, and I mean best in the broadest sense, in the top division. We can't have we can't keep having clubs who are just purely focused on the performance side of the game, because we know that it's just not sustainable in that sense. Success, yes, breeds success. I get that, but the emphasis on grading is to make sure that we've got the best clubs in the top division.
Most clubs have a financial year end of 30th of November, and virtually, not necessarily all of them, but a lot of them will have already boosted their financial balance sheet. With, for example, Wakefield have got a new wealthy owner who's made sure, I think, that their balance sheet on the 30th of November last year gets him the maximum marks. And there are quite a lot, those 7 clubs that got grade A's, if we assume that they will retain their grade A status, which hopefully is the case, we've then got all the ones who sort of narrowly missed out. Several of them seem now quite confident that they will get up to grade A. Just one question, really. What will happen if you actually have 13 clubs with a grade A? Will they all play in Super League next year?
I don't think we'll end up with 13
No, but
grade
just the hypothetical situation.
Hypothetical. And look, that's the aspiration, isn't it? We said that from day one. The aspiration here is to have at least 12 grade A clubs, and once we break that threshold of 12, that's when we can have a meaningful conversation about the construct of Super League as a competition, with the likelihood that you wouldn't probably want a grade A club playing in the Championship. So therefore, that the immediate answer to that, Martin, would be we would then look at the number of teams in Super League.
Yeah. And what happens if, let's imagine the number of A grade clubs is boosted to 9, for sake of argument, and so you're going to have 3 grade B clubs in Super League next year. The thing that gets me is, what happens if club number 12 gets 13.5 points and club number 13 gets 13.45? In other words, the margin between 12 and 13 is so slight that there is inevitably room for argument about how accurate the scores are. Because it's going to be very important, that, isn't it? Because the club that gets into Super League is going to have an equal distribution of funds with the other Super League clubs, which, whatever that figure will be next year. But the club that goes into the Championship will have relatively a minuscule...
Very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, very different.
And that just seems to me, that's... that. So the future of a club that's number 13 on the list, might have done everything right. It might have improved its grading score and so on, but it still might miss out and face real difficulties.
Yeah, and that's the reality of the situation. I guess what we've put in place is a framework for clubs to work towards, to aspire to be that A grade club that we're looking for. And then we've also, there's elements of resilience that we've had to put into the system to make sure that, it is transparent, it is clean, independent auditor to look at the scoring system.
Are you confident, though, that the club that finishes 13th won't take legal action to, I mean...
I don't know. That's reality. Who knows what they might end up doing, and a little bit will depend on who that club is as well, and how they see it. But, from our perspective, it's very much transparency. Everyone knew what they were signing up to. It was approved. It's been put in place 12 months in advance of it actually becoming real. Everybody will get given the chance to improve their scoring. Let's wait and see what comes out.
The trouble is, sometimes people sign up for all sorts of things that they later regret, don't they? Including marriage and many other things.
It's the way life is, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Just on IMG, though, obviously, as I say, the grading thing is the most prominent thing that they've done. But what else? I mean, they've negotiated... Was it them who negotiated the new TV deal, and they've negotiated the deals in France, presumably, and other places, I imagine. And they've actually given the clubs a lot of guidance on digital marketing and so on as well, haven't they? Is that what they do? How do you see their role, over the next 12 years, Rhodri?
Interesting. We had a call with them yesterday, actually, to kind of refresh the recommendations that they delivered probably 18 months ago, and to kind of assess where we were at with those recommendations, the 7 recommendations that they provided. So, look, I think the biggest headline, I guess, for us and will remain our biggest headline. To the point you've talked about, broadcast and audiences, is around fandom, the sports fandom. We've got to keep driving our fandom in terms of increasing the number of people who come into contact with the sport, whether that be through the BBC for the first time or whether that be a regular League Express reader. You know, we have to keep banging the drum and developing our fandom, because ultimately if we succeed at that, everyone will benefit, because more people will be watching the game on TV, more people will be subscribing to Sky Sports, more people will be coming through the turnstiles, more people will be going onto digital platforms to engage with the sport. So the real headline in all of this is around fandom and driving our fandom. And yes, we've put the blocks in place around broadcast. We've done a lot of work on digital in this place in Rugby League Commercial to help us achieve that. That focus is now going to go onto the clubs this year. So that's where a lot of IMG Digital's time is going to be spent, with clubs as opposed to us here. Attendances, we're going to continue to work hard on our own attendances, but also the club's attendances. And the fourth, I guess, pillar in all of that is our players. We're forever seeing that actually people aren't necessarily supporting clubs anymore. They're supporting players. You know, best example is Lionel Messi. Okay, we don't quite have a Lionel Messi yet, but you know, fans of Barcelona, now fans of Inter Miami, buying Inter Miami merchandise. Players are the ones who get us through the doors. They're the ones that are on the field producing the magic. They're also producing some of the off-field magic. Mikey Lewis in round one with the medal with the young girl who was a Hull FC fan, I think.
Yes, that's right.
Which is even better. But the players are the ones that are going to help us achieve that. And so we've got to put some time and effort into a select number of players who we think will be able to cut through for us.
I believe that the players who have been signed to what do they call it, to major contracts this year have been told that they've got to
the marquee players.
Marquee players. Sorry,
yeah,
I forgot
the marquee
the word.
Players.
They've got to front up to the media and and develop profiles of their own.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about last year when the RFL side were talking about marquee players and salary cap and the desire to have a third marquee player and stuff. I guess one of our requests was, okay, if there is an agreement that a third marquee is going to come in, then we want to be able to have access to them, because at the moment we're finding it quite difficult to get access to the best players all the time. And the clubs were understanding of that, and I guess with the new world of Rugby League Commercial and IMG, there was an agreement in place. So the players, it's a fairly broad clause, but in effect it means that there is more accessibility to those marquee players now for us to be able to go and do our media and our PR and our marketing campaigns with those players.
And are they being trained, for example, to front up to the media in an interesting way, for example?
Yeah, and that's some of the work I guess we're doing behind the scenes at the moment, is putting a program in place. IMG have what they call a star creation program, and a couple of players have been through that already during the World Cup. A couple of the England players, Bevan French has done some stuff with IMG around star creation, but we want to try and get a couple more through that system in terms of, like you say, developing them as people, not just rugby players. What are their backstories? What are their interests? Does somebody like cooking, for example? If so, that's a real good one for us. We could go and hit a multiple number of cooking programs. Would you be interested in speaking to Jack Wellesby? By the way, he's a chef. He's a pretty good chef at the same time. For a chef who's a rugby fan, goes, actually, that'd be a great kind of segue into talking.
Well, Ryan Hall's a great piano player, apparently.
Yeah, he's also good at the Rubik's Cube, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Yes, he certainly is. Multi-talented.
That, Martin, is a really good example. We're talking about Ryan Hall, who, with respect to Ryan, he's nearly as old as I am.
Yeah.
But we're still talking about him as a piano player and a Rubik's Cube player. We want, with respect to Ryan, we want the 22 to 25-year-olds who, the Harry Newmans, the Jack Wellesbys, the Mikey Lewises, three really good examples. We want those guys to tell us what their equivalent of Ryan Hall is.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, like, as a fan of the sport, you do care about that backstory. You do care what their interests are, and when it's not all about their on-field performances, you do like seeing that different side of them. And we might just throw the invitation out to all our marquee players. You're welcome. Okay. Yeah, go with. But I guess we'll throw the invitation out to our marquee players. They're always welcome to come on the League Express podcast if they want to come and show a different side of their personality.
Actually, would you think about releasing the names of all the marquee players? Because we think we know who they are, but nonetheless, we're probably not correct in every single case, are we? I don't think.
Yeah, there's 20 of them.
Yeah.
So we know who the 20, and look, some are not applicable to the star creation. You know, they're Australian, they're 30 years old, so it's perhaps not in our interest to promote them as much as a Mikey Lewis or a Harry Newman. But you know, there are 20 marquee players who are all earning money, which the clubs deem to be their standout players. So we've got to make the most of them.
And that brings me on to another point. A bit conscious about time moving on now, but Australian players within Super League, Rhodri, every club's entitled to have an overseas quota of 7 players. I just wonder whether that's too many now, and whether we should be trying at some point, you know, in the not too distant future, to reduce that to 6 and then perhaps 5 and 4 and so on. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I have nothing against Australian players. I love watching them, but we do need to develop our own talent. And some clubs are very good at doing that. Obviously, some are better than others. But we need to give clubs more of an incentive to, you know, for us to be able to reduce that Australian number, I think. I mean, I wonder what your feelings are on that.
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with that. I think there's an element of clubs. Each club is probably in a very different place. You know, if you look at use St Helens and Wigan as an example. You know, speaking to Chris and Mike pretty regularly, you know, they've got a pathway coming through where they're making decisions about first team players now in the knowledge that they've got a 17-year-old coming through. I think I met Jack Faramond for the first time on Saturday night. He was doing the corporate run, as they call it, on Saturday night, and you know, he's a 17-year-old kid, but the way he's being talked about is, you know, he is going to be the next big thing coming out of English rugby league. So I think every club is in a very different place, Martin, in terms of academies. Would you like to see a more developed UK-based Super League? Yeah, of course you would, absolutely. But you know, you can't tell me that what a Bevan French or a Jay Field does for Wigan doesn't appeal and doesn't.
No, and that's why I wouldn't reduce it to 0. Obviously,
yeah. You know, so I still,
but you'd still be signing guys like that. If we only had 3 overseas players, that wouldn't stop Bevan French being signed up, would it?
That's true. I understand the point you're making, and I think it's, like I say, I think every club is in a very different place, and you know, I think the challenge we all have is to grow that pond of. It comes back to fandom, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, that 8-year-old who has watched that game for the first time on Saturday night on the BBC might just go and pick up a rugby ball on Sunday. In 10 years' time, he could be the next big thing, and that's our job, I guess, at Rugby League Commercial is to try and support, I guess, what every club is doing in trying to bring new players through to some extent.
And on that subject, and again going back to IMG, it was very much a central part of what IMG were talking about when they were first appointed, that London was going to be a significant target for growth. And obviously, I don't think anybody anticipated London Broncos getting such a low grading score, but obviously London is important in any sport. If you've got the capital city with a major club, as we would obviously like to have, it would make a massive difference, I think, to everything that you've been talking about, fandom and so on. What can be done to reach that point, Rhodri, do you think? And what can IMG do to help us reach that point?
Yeah, it's interesting. We had this kind of exact conversation yesterday, actually. And I think you're right. When the recommendations were written and London was in there, I don't think there was an expectation London perhaps were in Super League as quickly as they perhaps did. They finished 5th last year, didn't they? And got their way through the playoffs. And the club at the moment isn't in the right place, as you can see from that grading score. But that doesn't mean London just disappears off the priority area. So I think it's probably 2 things. One is we have to provide the London audience with rugby league opportunities. We clearly have that with Wembley. Internationals is the other thing. You know, we've not had an international down in London since that World Cup semi-final, and probably before that, a long period before that, probably I think West Ham when England played Australia back in when was that, 14 or 16.
Yeah.
So providing opportunities. There was talk around an IMG new event, which at the moment is effectively Magic Weekend. We're continuing with Magic Weekend for the right reasons. We have to find a way of activating that London market. 100% agree.
But
with you.
But we've not found it.
But we haven't found the perfect pill yet. No, we haven't found it, and I think that's been. I don't think it's a new problem for us, but it's something that we are looking at, and something that we want to achieve over the next couple of years. Because, as you say, when you look at Sky Sports audience data, when you look at our database data, when you look at just in terms of population, London is effectively the third on the list for us after the Northwest and effectively the Northeast and Yorkshire. So it would be remiss of us to totally ignore it.
And what about France? Because obviously we've now got this new broadcasting deal with L'Équipe and the Catalans broadcasters, title of which I can't quite remember.
TV3.
Obviously, I suppose everybody thought Toulouse were going to be in Super League this year before London went over there and upset the apple cart, you might say. Do you see Toulouse as a potentially viable member of Super League as either a 12-team Super League or a 14-team Super League? Would you, for example, if Toulouse did come in and did get a Grade A ranking, as hopefully they might, would you then like to see Super League moving up to 14 teams to still retain 12 in this country?
Yeah, similar conversation yesterday.
I should have been involved yesterday, shouldn't I?
You might have been listening. From my perspective, I think I'm okay to say I see the Dragons as a very different kind of club to Toulouse.
Yes.
The Dragons are a mainstay of Super League. They've had success on the field, they're successful off the field, etc. So I think we kind of treat them slightly differently to Toulouse. Toulouse, it'll be really interesting to see how they go this year in terms of performance on the field, but also off the field. Now knowing that there's a grading structure around, clearly in the illustrative gradings, they were 9th or 10th, which suggests that they would be in Super League next year. But I think there will be some clubs around that same area who are striving to overtake them, and so I think it's going to be a really interesting year for Toulouse in terms of their future. Look, I think there is a realization that there is an amount of money that is leaving the British game to go to France, and we can all see that, and we all know what that amount is. And what do we get back in return for it? And a number of our stakeholders would say, well, the benefit is all going to France in that they get the distribution, they get the TV deal where the Dragons are on telly every week, etc. But what is coming back? And that's probably one of the questions that we need to answer and work through to ensure that the French club participation in Super League is done on level playing terms and level playing term. So that's some of the work that we'll be doing this year.
I mean, does that mean that you'd be, for example, withdrawing the distribution to French clubs?
I'm not sure we'd go quite as extreme as that.
No.
To start with, who knows what that might become? But already, I think again, there's two different models in operation. But for next year, the travel. The whole travel will change in terms of teams going out to Catalan next year in terms of who pays for the travel.
You mean Catalans will pay?
The Dragons will pick up that bill now. So slowly but surely the
how
balance.
How have they reacted to being told that that's what will happen?
It's been talked about, it's knowledge, but we've not really got into that detail yet.
No.
That's something we're going to do very quickly because it's good for everybody to know how the land lies for next year. Toulouse are already doing it. Don't forget that's what they already do that for the Championship clubs and did it in Super League 2 years ago when they were in Super League. So, in effect, we're just bringing Catalan in line with what Toulouse are already doing.
Yeah, I mean, Bernard Gouache is not necessarily an easy guy to negotiate with, is he? I should think. I can't imagine they'd be all that chuffed at being told that.
No, equally, they have a TV deal where, all their games are broadcast in France. and so the commercial benefit of that deal for the Dragons,
yes,
I'm not sure
can be offset.
I'm not sure we quite understand how good it is for them.
No.
But I'm pretty sure it's a positive move for them. They were very keen for us to conclude that deal.
Yes.
So I would, to your point, I think it would offset that.
But I think I've heard this so often that the clubs object to the French clubs because they think that they're not giving anything back. But actually, they're giving an international profile, which is, quite remarkable and unlike most other sports in this country. So, and the same could have been said of Toronto, of course, when they were playing. So, it's up to the game, surely, to learn how to take advantage of that profile that French clubs give us.
Yeah, and there is a pathway in France as well. The Elite One competition is, from what I can see from what I see on social media and what have you, it's it's thriving out there. So there is a potential pathway out there as well. So as hard as it is to generate the playing pyramid here in this country, there is also a pyramid down in France. So
yes.
That might expand, over the next couple of years if that Elite One continues to thrive. So that means there's more viable Super League players available to not just the French clubs, but to any club.
Interestingly, Rhodri, Leeds Rhinos at Hull KR on Friday night had 2 French players starting at prop forward.
Of course
for them.
They did, yeah.
Which I'm not sure about this, but I suspect that's the first time
unique
ever. Yeah. And great. And of course, what we really want to see is enough French players performing at that level to be able to play for France and give us a real tight international game like New Zealand v Australia.
100%, and that was again go back to the recommendations 18 months ago. It's amazing what you write 18 months ago to what you think now, but a lot of that was around the international calendar and playing France every summer and what have you, and that was based on the 2025 World Cup being in France.
Yes.
And that no longer is there, sadly. So
tragedy, really.
Yeah, it is, and so therefore then what is our relationship with the French Federation like, with no kind of North Star on the horizon? And that's the bit, again, that we need to work through.
And just one other thing on the international games. Samoa, do we know anything yet about that? Are they coming this year? Or
we certainly hope so. Yeah, we certainly hope so.
The odds are in favour, are they?
Well, we had a good call with Samoa and the IRL and the NRL 2 Thursdays ago, and we've all been tasked to go away and do some work behind the scenes. Again, seeing Andrew Abdo in person this week will be a good thing for that conversation. So hopefully we can get something confirmed over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, great. Perfect. We've taken up a lot of your time, Rhodri, mate. We really appreciate you, coming on and giving us the time of day. One last question from me: poker or blackjack player, mate? Will you see yourself at the tables this weekend?
I'm not sure there'll be much of that going on. A bit fearful of it, if I'm being honest. Look, it's going to be a really interesting, eye-opening weekend. Not least because it's in Las Vegas. Never been, not sure what to expect, but I just think that, just not sure. But the spectacle of rugby league in Las Vegas, it probably will take me back to being stood at the Nou Camp and watching Catalan play Wigan.
Absolutely
just a unique experience,
which wasn't followed up, was it? And that's unfortunate, but that's another story.
Not without trying. I think there was definite desire from the Dragons to try and replicate that last year. Dates didn't quite work out, but I don't think it's totally gone. I think there is an aspiration to do something similar.
But you'll have seen, Rhodri, that the NRL has given its players this weekend all sorts of guidance about how to survive a weekend in Las Vegas.
Absolutely.
Presumably you'll be reading through that, will you? Avoid 100%. The ladies of the night, they say, don't they?
Awesome work, mate. Well, thanks again. All the best. Safe travels to Vegas.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Enjoy your time. And we might end it here, guys. I think Martin and I, we might try and do a part 2 regarding the World Club Challenge. Obviously, we've spoken to Rhodri a lot today about some other things involved with the game. Yes. But we might end it here, guys. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the second part.
Thanks to Rhodri. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhodri.